Alan and Maya Litovsky took their son, Justin Litovsky, then 6 years old, to a party at Diddy's house on July 4th weekend of 1999.
Put his arm around me in an uncomfortable way, close to areas that you shouldn't as a grown man.
He recalls what he saw at the party.
So I remember marijuana and topless women. That's the two main things that I remember.
P. Diddy is about to be slammed with more than 100 new civil lawsuits as a wave of accusers come forward with even more shocking allegations. And according to the attorney bringing the lawsuits, these hundreds of accusations include child sexual assault.
Today we're going to dive into a wild, shocking, and disturbing story involving none other than Diddy Combs. You've probably seen Diddy in the headlines before, but trust me, this latest revelation will make you see him in a completely different light. We will be discussing the unbelievable experience of a man named Justin Litovsky, who when he was just 6 years old ended up attending one of Diddy's infamous parties. Yes, you heard that right, a 6-year-old at a Diddy party, but what's even more shocking is what he saw there. We'll also be talking about the 120 new lawsuits against Diddy, some involving minors, as well as the criminal charges that have landed him in jail. There's a lot to get through, so let's jump right, and let's start with Justin Litovsky. At just 6 years old, Justin found himself at one of Diddy's notorious parties. And the story of how he ended up there is pretty unusual. His father, a photographer, had been hired to cover the event, and for whatever reason, he decided to take his 6-year-old son along.
You've got like a 6-year-old kid. There's a lot of cool things you could do with the kid on a July afternoon. Take him to the zoo, take him to some theme park, maybe Coney Island, take him to Serendipity for a frozen hot chocolate, personal favorite. But would you take him to a party at Diddy's house? That's the question, and that is what two parents did. David Allen and Maya Litovsky took their son, Justin Litovsky, then 6 years old, to a party at Diddy's house on July 4th weekend of 1999.
In an interview, Justin and his mother gave a detailed account of what happened that night. According to them, the party was far from a place for a child. Drugs were everywhere, there was a lot of nudity, and the overall vibe was wild and chaotic. This was an adult party in every sense of the word, and it left Justin and his family with memories that were far from pleasant. His mother, recounting the events, expressed how shocked she was when they realized the full scope of the situation. The environment was completely unsuitable for a child, with behavior going unchecked and drugs flowing freely. It's horrifying to think about a 6-year-old witnessing such things, but that's exactly what...
Before his arrest, disgraced music mogul Sean Diddy Combs was famous for holding his annual 4th of July party in the Hamptons. All of the well-known partygoers wore white, and it wasn't exactly a family-friendly event. Now imagine you're a 6-year-old kid and you find yourself a guest there. Allison Hall has more.
Can you believe this 6-year-old boy was once a guest at Diddy's infamous white party? The disgraced mogul has his arm draped around a young Justin Litovsky back in 1999. Justin is now 31 and tells Inside Edition about taking that photo.
He put his arm around me in an uncomfortable way, close to areas that you shouldn't as a grown man.
He recalls what he saw at the party.
So I remember marijuana and topless women. That's the two main things that I remember.
So, how'd he end up there? Well, his father, David Allen, was Diddy's photographer, snapping pictures of partygoers in the Hamptons. Justin's mom, Maya, was also there. She says the party was family-friendly at first, but then turned raunchy.
People were getting high. There were girls swimming topless, young-looking girls that were, not dressed. We moved to another part of the house so that he wouldn't be exposed to what was going on.
In later years, Diddy implemented a curfew for children.
The kids have like an hour left. So get extra comfortable, but this thing turns into something that when y'all get older, y'all don't want to come to.
I think he's a monster.
This week, Houston-based lawyer Tony Busby says more than 120 people are coming forward with claims Diddy sexually abused them.
Our youngest victim at the time of the occurrence was 9 years old. We have an individual who was 14 years old. We have one who was 15.
Did Diddy assault you in any way?
When you say assault, I don't know the exact definition, but he put his arm around me in an uncomfortable way.
Diddy is now behind bars, facing federal charges of sex trafficking and racketeering. He denies all claims of sexual abuse, including against
Renowned attorney Tony Busby has announced 120 new lawsuits against Diddy. Busby is representing a large number of victims, and in many of the lawsuits there are accusations that follow a disturbing pattern, drugging the victim, often underage, followed by various forms of assault. These lawsuits paint an alarming picture of what's been going on at Diddy's parties over the years.
Visit with you real quickly before we close here about some specific instances without disclosing the victim's name. You probably know that depending on the age of the victim, you can file these cases, these individual cases, under Jane Doe or John Doe. Each state is different in that respect. Typically there is a balancing test, like the public's right to know the name of the victim and plaintiff versus the confidentiality and the safety of the plaintiff. So we'll have to struggle with that with each one of these cases. Our intention, of course, is to, like we always do, file these cases under a pseudonym until the court tells us otherwise. But let me share with you a few, just kind of give you a sense of the kind of cases and the kind of instances that people are calling and reporting that we are trying to corroborate, vet, and these are the ones that we've already corroborated, vetted, and collected evidence on. One individual who was 22 years at the time she was assaulted said that the typical MO at one of these parties that have been widely discussed in the press was that when you were handed a drink, and now we know that the drink is laced with something, if you refused to drink it, you were kicked out of the party. Now, let that sink in for a minute. I mean, the admission to this party was that you had to drink the chosen drink that was handed to you. And now we know that in most cases, I would say 90% of the cases, these individuals were drugged with some sort of drug. That was kind of the MO. Another instance, this individual who was 9 years old at the time was taken to an audition in New York City with Bad Boy Records. Other boys were there to audition as well. All of them were trying to land a record deal. All of them were minors. This individual was sexually abused, allegedly by Sean Combs and several other people at the studio in the promise to both his parents and to him himself of getting a record deal. Another instance, another minor, told allegedly by Sean Combs that he would make him a star, but he needed to visit with him in private about it, away from his parents. Once they were in a private area, allegedly Mr. Combs made the victim perform oral sex upon him.
Busby has been very vocal about the allegations, stating that there's a clear and consistent pattern of behavior. Here, these parties were not just social gatherings, but rather events where vulnerable individuals, often minors, were preyed upon. It's deeply disturbing, and it's going to be incredibly difficult for Diddy to fight these charges.
Another incident, an individual 15 years old at the time, flown to New York City to attend a party, was drugged, and then taken into a private room, allegedly in the presence of Mr. Combs, where this female individual, minor, was raped, and then other individuals took turns raping her. Another individual, 26 at the time of the occurrence, was picked up allegedly by Mr. Combs and several other people in a black SUV from the airport, was given one drink in the SUV, and then literally woke up the next day not knowing what had happened, but with pain and damage to both her vagina and her anus, where she then went to the hospital. She was missing her underwear and her shoes. Another instance, an individual, this time not a minor, attended a group dinner, allegedly with Sean Combs in Miami. She wasn't drinking because she was pregnant, but whatever she drank at the table, apparently, at least according to her, was laced with something. She blacked out, and she woke up in the same bed, again allegedly, with Mr. Combs in his mansion in Miami. Her vagina and her anus were torn and sore. And I could go on. I mean, literally, you're sensing a theme here. It's the same theme, and it all involves some sort of drug.
All these new cases will only make things worse for him after the Cassie and Lil Rod lawsuit. Diddy is in jail right now after a racketeering indictment, but he wants to fight the charges, which will be difficult with a slew of new accusations.
12 civil lawsuits and 3 federal charges weren't enough. Sean P. Diddy Combs is now up against more than 100 new shocking accusations in his alleged sex trafficking scheme that spanned multiple decades. Diddy's fall from grace started nearly 1 year ago in November 2023, when his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, filed a bombshell civil lawsuit against him. Cassie's lawsuit laid out some major claims against the once beloved music icon, saying that over the course of their years-long relationship, Diddy physically, verbally, and sexually assaulted Cassie. And she didn't shy away from any of the details either. She gave specific examples of Diddy's alleged abuse, like when he forced her to carry illegal firearms or have sex with prostitutes. And Cassie's lawsuit also introduced us to the now infamous term freak-off. She says it started when Mr. Combs hired a man and brought the man to his home in Los Angeles. The man, Mr. Combs, and Miss Ventura wore masquerade masks and ingested drugs. Mr. Combs directed Miss Ventura to perform sexual acts with this man while Mr. Combs watched them. He allegedly masturbated while he directed Miss Ventura and the man to do specific sexual acts. Mr. Combs began to call the arrangement a freak-off, or FO. He would repeatedly tell Miss Ventura at random moments that he wanted an FO, and Miss Ventura was eventually expected to facilitate the location and the hiring of male sex workers. These same allegations were made over multiple other civil lawsuits, including the one filed by Rodney Jones, who's also known as the producer Lil Rod. His lawsuit was filed back in February and also specifically mentions freak-offs. Lil Rod alleges he saw a similar pattern to what Cassie described, saying he was sexually assaulted by Diddy, forced to consume drugs, and even have sex with a prostitute. This same lawsuit alleges there are hundreds of hours of video and audio recordings of Diddy and others participating in this illegal activity. We now know that when federal authorities raided Diddy's homes back in March, they were collecting some of that electronic evidence, and now it's being used in the case against him. The federal indictment against Diddy mentions this evidence and also defines freak-offs, saying they were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronic.
What's even more shocking is that Diddy may not be the only one involved in this alleged criminal organization. There are allegations that others, potentially even close associates of Diddy, could be named in future lawsuits where charges will have to wait and see if any more names come to light, but this could turn into a much bigger scandal.
But allegedly, Diddy wasn't the only one involved in this illegal activity. The federal indictment confirms what Lil Rod said. Diddy's associates would assist in the planning and execution of these freak-offs. These associates facilitated the freak-offs by, among other things, booking hotel rooms for the freak-offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak-off supplies, including controlled substances, baby oil, lubricant, extra linens, and lighting, cleaning the hotel rooms after the freak-offs to try to mitigate room damage, arranging for travel for victims, commercial sex workers, and Combs to and from freak-offs, resupplying Combs with requested supplies, delivering large sums of cash to Combs to pay the commercial sex workers, and scheduling the delivery of IV fluids. During the federal raids, investigators collected some freak-off items, including more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. Prosecutors used all this evidence and more to move forward with Diddy's charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Diddy's pleaded not guilty to these charges and says his side of the story will come out at trial. All the while, Diddy is behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, having been denied bail twice. And while Diddy is literally in a holding pattern, the case against him continues to build, with a wave of new civil lawsuits soon headed his way. This week, Houston-based attorney Tony Busby announced 120 civil lawsuits against Diddy will be filed in the next 30 days. If that number is staggering, consider this one, the number of people that initially reported the sexual abuse. Busbee says it's thousands. Now, the lawsuits haven't been filed yet, so we're still unclear about specific information like dates or names. Here's what we do know. Busbee says the assaults took place in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York, dating as far back as 1991. 60 of the plaintiffs are women and the other 60 are men, and of them, 25 alleged they were sexually assaulted as minors, the youngest of which was only 9 years old when the sexual assault occurred. Others were only 14 or 15. Over the dozens of lawsuits, plaintiffs will describe new allegations against Diddy, including violent sexual assault or rape, sexual abuse, facilitating sex with controlled substances, false imprisonment, compelling prostitution, sexual misconduct, dissemination of video recordings, and sexual abuse of minors.
A former prosecutor recently weighed in on the situation, and their assessment was grim with the sheer number of lawsuits and charges against him. It's hard to see how Diddy can survive this emotionally or financially. Think about it, 120 lawsuits alone would drain anyone's resources, but combine that with the racketeering charge and Diddy's situation is looking increasingly dire. The financial toll will be astronomical, especially if settlements or damages are awarded in the lawsuits, and with the federal